Okay, we're back. We're back for part two of the S&M show about travels, and we're going to talk now about Iran, where you went. First, you went to India, then you went. How'd you get from India to Iran?
We flew.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, took what airline? Air India? Or?
I think it was Dubai Air.
Oh, Dubai. Okay.
Yeah, Dubai Air.
Yeah. If it's Dubai, was it Fly Dubai?
Fly Dubai. I think that must have been it.
Fly Dubai. If it's Fly Dubai, it's an arm of Emirates. It's the cheap.
Oh man.
The discounted.
Were those ever cramped seats? Let me tell you. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you stories about Fly Dubai that are interesting. So. Yeah. Okay. So you went to, where'd you fly into?
We flew into Tehran.
Oh, okay. And so how was Tehran? It's a big city, right?
It's a big city. Tehran it's not what people might expect. Tehran. Let's see. I heard constantly about the welcoming of the Iranian people and how welcoming they were and how friendly, and they were helpful. But they were rather somber, especially in Tehran. I wouldn't say they were overly welcoming, but people are generally helpful. They look rather intense, and they look kind of like angry. But when you actually ask for help or something, they're quite helpful.
Nice people.
Yeah, they're nice people. They're nice people. They may not look it. They may look a little intimidating, but they're actually very nice. Tehran. I would say some of the other places we went, which are more touristy, were more friendly, nicer. Not that they weren't okay in Tehran, but like I said, they just more intense and a little bit less approachable in Tehran. Fairly busy. I mean, I wouldn't say it's overwhelming traffic like say Delhi, but it's a big city. It's busy, clean. Iran is quite clean, safe. It's fairly developed. I mean, the roads are well paved. They're in good condition. The buildings are maintained. They're big on, well maintained.
I think one of the pictures you sent me had a big poster of Ayatollah Khomeini.
Oh yeah, you find pictures of him in a lot of places.
I'm maybe a little ignorant here. He's not still the leader, is he?
I think he passed away a few years ago.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
There's another guy with almost the same name, Khamenei, K-H-A.
Maybe
K-H-O,
that's okay.
And he's the current Ayatollah who's in charge. But the old Khomeini.
So they're under religious rule.
Iran is not what people think, especially in the media. I mean, I had friends telling me, be careful, it's not a good time to be there. And the worst thing about being there at that time, because this was in October of 2022, so just last month, the worst thing about being there was the internet restrictions. And they always have them, but usually you can get by it with VPNs. They found a way to restrict or cut out almost all the VPNs, so we wasted a lot of time. I wasted a lot of time because you do want to be able to see a YouTube video or something, getting past the VPNs and you had to rotate them, and they would work sometimes, or sometimes there was just too much traffic. I only found 4 that worked.
Right.
And all the others like NordVPN, ExpressVPN, no way.
Yeah, because they've already figured out the tunnel IP addresses that they're using and block them.
The servers, they know their IP address, and that's it.
Right.
It's a religious city. It's a religious country in the sense that it's a religious leadership. People are always like, oh, it's so oppressive and this and that and those poor women. Listen, the women are not that oppressed. They're going to say they are. They certainly have more restrictions than the men, but women drive. They have businesses. They have shops. And I've seen women in the street with no hijab, wearing jeans. So it's not that they can't do that. The police will sometimes enforce it. It seems to be very irregularly enforced.
Right.
And there's these SEPA, which are the morality police. They're everywhere, and they're very intimidating. But after this whole thing of the protests were going on, I didn't see any protests. I didn't see the police bother anybody. But they were there in a massive presence. They all have motorcycles. They look like motorcycle gangs. They're big guys. Look, I'm pushing 6'1". They make me look small.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are on roids. They're big, well-built guys, fully armored with all the it looks like motorcycle gear, but it's riot gear with the helmets and the batons.
RoboCop.
And they're there They look like RoboCops, and
Yeah.
they're all there in groups of 40 on every corner, 40, 30, 50. You go here, there's 40. You go there, there's 50. They just look like they don't want to be there. But we did talk to some Iranian people who said, oh yeah, the normal police in the army are fine. They just have their jobs to do, and they're okay. These guys are crazy. They're religious fanatics. And so what I've said is, it's a country full of contradictions. Things that you read about that you can't do, you can do. And things that you would think would be easy to do aren't. And the laws are either completely flouted by people. I saw women walking by without a hijab in protest in front of the police, the religious police that they're supposed to be afraid of. They didn't do anything.
Right.
They were walking by without a hijab, and people think a hijab is a burqa that covers the whole body. That's not. It's just a headscarf.
Yeah.
Some people
Well, the
wear,
abaya is
it's
the gown.
the what's it called?
Abaya.
Well, I never heard that word there. That's maybe an Arabic word.
It could.
And a lot of people did wear that, but it's completely voluntary.
Yeah.
I mean, the ones who wanted to were wearing jeans. So I've even seen high heels there.
Iran, I think they're going to speak mostly Farsi.
Yeah, it's
So
Farsi.
it may have a different word in Farsi.
Well, Farsi is heavily influenced by Arabic, but
Yeah.
it's not Arabic.
Right.
And it's not really related to Arabic. So a lot of them had that, but that's completely voluntary. And I read things that you can't hold hands in public. That's not true.
And there were lots.
And then
of
you would
people.
think, oh, they'd have to be married. Also not true. I saw plenty of young couples doing it, and I asked, is that supposed to be okay? And they're like, oh yeah, you can hold hands here. It's not true that you can't do that. Even if you're not married, that doesn't matter.
Right.
But and dating is technically legal, but people date. There's even dating websites.
Right.
Some are even sponsored by the government. But the government is intrusive. It does get in people's lives, and that's what they're really fed up about. The media portrays it as this whole, it's all about the oppression of women and the headscarves. Well, even the people there kind of put that at the forefront.
Sure.
But as an outside observer, looking at what they're really complaining about, not what they're saying, and the actions, it's not about the oppression of women. The women aren't that oppressed. They can walk the street alone. They can go to work. They have jobs. They have businesses. They can wear jeans. They can wear high heels. They wear lipstick. They have nail polish.
Right.
Bullshit.
Right.
What it's about is government corruption because they tax a lot. They restrict people. Like, in other words, you can't have a business. You can't be a money lender. You can't lend money. But it's okay for the government to do it at 18% interest.
Right.
That's okay. It's what people are saying. It's like, it's not okay for us because of Muslim law, but it's okay for them. And the government, the police could detain a person who doesn't wear a hijab or tell them to wear it. And like I said, usually the law's flouted, but on rare occasion you get some crazy police because there's no accountability who will brutally enforce it, as we found with this young woman who was killed.
Right.
And rape in the prisons is pretty much the norm. Even boys and young girls, I'm told they'll be raped to death and then murdered. But I don't think it's the norm. It happens frequently, but it's not like you can't walk the street without your hijab. It's just you got to be worried. There is a chance that some police will, at best, come and warn you to wear it and intrude on your life. And that's what people don't want, this intrusion.
Yeah.
Or, at worst, detain you and you don't come out.
Yeah, maybe it's just the not ambiguity, but the selectiveness of the enforcement.
It's
either no hijab or hijab. Make up your mind.
It's kind of selective enforcement, yeah. And I don't know if that's the government pushing that, or this uncertainty to create fear. Some Iranians said it was the government wants this,
Yeah.
but it's this kind of, it's flouted by people because they're protesting what's happened, and nothing happens. Or once in a while you hear some horrific story, but the horrific stories don't really sound like a government edict. It sounds like unaccountability by murdering thugs.
Yeah.
Like this story with the woman who was killed, this young woman who was actually a Kurd descendancy. It was 2 men and 2 women. SEPA is the morality police. 2 women actually found her, reported her, and the 4 of them, the 2 men and the 2 women, detained her, and she was beaten to death. I'm quite sure she was raped. That's common there. But it happens to men also. Men and boys get raped and murdered.
Yeah.
They get detained. They get harassed. It's not just a woman thing. It's just that the women are the ones being brave and protesting now. There is more intrusion into their life with this whole hijab. People are tired of having to be told how to dress and what they can't do because of religion, and when to do this and when not to do that. That includes men, and it includes husbands who are like, my wife doesn't want to wear a hijab, I don't care. And I don't want the police coming to tell us. And I said, well, I guess you can't tell the police to get lost. And said, we do. We tell them to go away. But there is a risk with that.
Yeah.
You could be detained and murdered. It can happen.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think it's something that happens all the time, but it happens. So it's not what people think. Things like dating are possible, holding hands in public are possible. So these restrictions that you read about, that I even read about, thought, oh, okay, that's, I guess, you know, if I'm not in that situation, I wasn't with a girlfriend or anything, but turns out, no, that's fine, you can do it. You'll read about it from even American bloggers saying, oh, you can't do that, you can't do this. It's not true.
Yeah. I mean, I've found that the media exaggerates or just completely gets it wrong. When I was in Saudi Arabia, I would read things written about Saudi Arabia that person clearly had never been there. It was evident from the things that they were saying that they had never been there. I mean, it was just general observations that were flat out wrong. And it's like, there's no way you could have seen that anywhere where you're saying you were. It just impossible. You're making stuff up.
Or it's changed over time.
No. This was one that was a couple of months before the time while I was there. So it wasn't like something 10 years old or anything like that. It was very in the present, and it was very wrong. And it wasn't even perspective. These were actual, factual things that were
Can you give an example?
Because I can't remember the article. I just remember reading it and going, and wanting to respond, but then when I looked at the comments, tons of people had already responded about how wrong this guy was, and that it's not like that. You know, if you don't like it, you know, don't stay or don't come back.
I wouldn't say. I mean, what I found was wrong was mainly from an American blogger, a woman who had been traveling there, and I believe she did. It wasn't wrong. There were some minor details that weren't correct. At least not anymore. Yeah. The major stuff she got right. So it wasn't that big a deal. And what I find about the media is, when I say it's not what you think, I'm not saying the media, as far as its description of Iran, is wrong. It's generally right. It's exaggerated, and there are some details that are off. And I know when I was there, I had people saying, "Oh, don't be there. The protests, and it's really a bad time." Look, the worst thing that happened was, like I said, was additional, beyond the norm, internet restrictions. Usually VPNs work there. We couldn't even get VPNs to work on rare occasion, and it was very slow. But we had access. We still had, even without a VPN, you had email, you had Google and Google Maps. Google would work, but some of the headlines you couldn't click through. The websites were blocked.
Gotcha.
So, and almost anything criticizing the government. But I mean, if I wanted to Google a food recipe, that would have been fine. Even some articles criticizing the government did come through. Yeah. But obviously the big ones, CNN and so on, that's blocked.
Well, that's done here as well.
Yeah, and major VPNs, they found the servers, they blocked them. That was a pain.
Yeah. I don't think here you can get to, like, I don't think you can get to the Wikipedia page through Google.
Here? Oh yeah.
No, for Bhumipon, for Rama 9. I don't think you can get to his.
Oh, if you're looking up stuff regarding the royalty, because there's stuff there that they consider illegal.
Less and Majestic.
Less Majestic. Yeah.
So I mean, I understand. Well, I don't understand why they want to block it, but I understand that it's blocked. So, and that things like that are
It's
blocked.
a dictatorship. I mean, let's face it. It wasn't as oppressive as I expected, but it's a dictatorship, and they do horrible things. And of course, they don't want the news getting out.
Yeah.
But I had an expression for India, which was always expect the unexpected, which was always something would happen that out of the blue that would just terrify you or be like, there's things, you'll see things if you ever go to India that you couldn't possibly imagine. Yeah. And I was told that, and they were right. Yeah. The expression for Iran was the opposite, which was never expect the expected. In other words, when you think you figured it out and it's going to be like this,
something will change.
It doesn't happen that way. Yeah. It's like it's not that something will change; it just doesn't happen. So being a dictatorship in an Islamic country with the Islamic Revolution and all this, we thought we'd have a lot of paperwork and interrogation when we went in. No, pay this for some, there's some additional insurance you got to buy. A lot of things are cheap there, some insurance. Okay, you bought your visa online. Okay, stamp, bye-bye. That was it. We never got stopped or asked by police once, ever.
Yeah.
For anything. Not for our passport, not to check, nothing. We rented a car, we drove through most of the country, nothing.
Did you go as a Canadian or as an EU citizen?
This is a different story. Now, before I get to that, I want to say in the media, people are saying, oh, these journalists were arrested and these people were detained. No offense to them, but I suspect they probably were journalists or were people at the wrong place at the wrong time. Obviously, if I see a protest developing
Right.
and there's SEPA police everywhere with their batons, I'm not going to whip out my camera and take a fucking video.
Yeah.
Don't be retarded. So I bet there were people detained, French tourists and so on. But use your brain. We met a Tunisian woman who asked me, she says, do you think it's safe here for women? I was like, well, for a woman, yeah. I don't think you have to worry here in Iran. She says, because we're foreigners here too. We're from Tunisia. And, we're worried about our safety. And we said, well, avoid the protests, where if you see them, I haven't seen any, but if you get, like there's a tower in town called the Azad Temple, which is supposed to have these protests. We drove by it, saw tons of police, didn't see any protests, just saw people holding hands and enjoying their day. But, you avoid those areas that are supposed to be where the protests happen.
Well, that's just common sense
So
wherever you go.
Yeah, but we drove by, we didn't stop there. And I told her, avoid that. She says, we went and we saw some protests beginning and we left right away. And I said, you did the smart thing. And
Right.
as far as I know, she had no problem. So obviously some protesters were coming. She saw police coming. She got out of there.
Yeah, it's just common sense.
It's
wherever you
common
go.
sense.
Yeah.
If you're in a dictatorship and you see some event happening and you start whipping out your camera and taking photos, is it fair? Is it right? No. But use your common sense.
Right.
So I bet they were journalists or they were tourists who stupidly thought or joined the protest. Well,
Yeah, I mean that's the same thing goes in your own country, right? You're in a city, you see people marching down the street, you see banners that say protest or, stop this or don't do that, and you don't want to be a part of it, you slink away, you go back in the building, you go in the opposite direction. So.
I don't think anything happened to them, but I remember the red shirt protests in Bangkok about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was kind of going through these busy areas. It was all peaceful. There was no problem. But I saw foreigners with, banners and supporting this. And it's like, this is not your country. You can't even vote here.
Yeah.
You're a guest.
Yeah.
Stay out of it. And
Yeah.
then don't bitch when you get arrested with the mob.
Yeah, and part of the restriction of the American passport is that if you get caught up in that stuff, actually protesting, you have the potential to lose your passport and
Oh,
have
okay, I
the
didn't know
government
that.
not support you. Yeah.
I didn't know that. But I mean, certainly if you were in a place like Iran and you're carrying
Yeah.
an American passport, that would be
Particularly if
worse
it's
for
a
you.
military situation.
Oh, then you really want to stay out.
If you pick up arms and fight against another country as an American, that you're not authorized by the military or by the government, you definitely stand to lose your
I
passport.
can say, we'll probably splice this in later, but even India had restrictions, and India is supposedly a democratic country.
Yeah,
And you asked earlier about cell phones, and
yeah,
that whole area of Ladakh and that whole north is near the Chinese border, and we also went through Kashmir,
right.
right? And that's all contested areas, and the normal mobile phone service that a tourist gets doesn't work there. We actually had to do something illegal and get an Indian person to get a special SIM card in his name to let us
Gotcha.
use so we could use Google Maps and have internet and not get
Yeah,
lost.
yeah,
As a tourist, you will get a normal SIM at Delhi, and as soon as you start getting into these disputed areas, I mean, they're clearly Indian controlled, but Pakistan is invaded,
right,
and they're worried about Chinese tensions.
right.
They don't allow, the SIM cards just stop working in those areas completely.
Which is not something that you even hear about.
You don't even
That
hear
there
about
are
it.
Chinese
It's India.
tensions in that area.
But India's an ally, and those SIM cards don't work. And I passed many military bases, and don't get me wrong, the military personnel were fine and friendly, but you cannot take a picture of those bases, even
Yeah.
from the outside, even of the
Yeah.
walls.
Yeah.
And there's signs everywhere saying don't do it. And I asked, I said, can I take a picture here? Because the scenery's beautiful. He says, no, don't point it in that direction. That's a military base. They will detain you.
Yeah.
Now, Doesn't mean they're not nice people and they won't release you without being harmed.
Right.
But you got restrictions even in democratic countries. So, use your common sense.
Right.
And again, I'm not defending the Iranian government in any way. And going back to that, the Iranian people, by the way, hate their government. So that's what I mean. It's not a country where you've got it figured out. It's not what you expect. So stuff that we thought would be normal procedure, like interrogating us and lots of paperwork, renting a car, would take an hour.
Right.
That was a funny thing. We almost died laughing. Guy comes out, he rents the car, and he's like, "I'm sorry, you got to sign this paper." I'm like, "What's this for?" He says, "Well, we have a law here about, women wearing a hijab. So if you pick up any women, they have to wear a hijab, and you have to sign this document that any women in the car will wear a hijab." It's like, we're two middle-aged friends driving through Iran. I just had this Saturday Night Live skit in my head where the two of us are in a convertible Cadillac with music and two women in hijabs in the back of the car having a party. It's like, yeah, we're partying, driving, like, we're going to be picking up random women and driving them in our car. But hey, that's okay, because they got hijabs. That's all right. That's okay. Funny law.
So.
But you asked about Canadian passport.
Yeah, about
No.
what passport you entered.
No, I'll say two things. One, first I'll address the Iran issue, and then I want to complain about Canada. I've got two passports. I live here in Thailand on a Spanish passport.
Right.
All right, because I'm a dual citizen. And so what happens is, if you're a citizen of the U.S., Canada, or the U.K., you cannot enter Iran without a guided tour.
And that's what I was going to say, is I probably could never go there.
You could, and you'd be fine.
Well,
people wouldn't have any issue with you.
Yeah.
But you need a guide,
Right.
and it has to be like a real guide, and you have to show that. With a European passport, you can actually book a visa online, either through an agency or directly through the government website. We tried through the government website. We both have EU passports, and for some unknown reason, they directed us, said, please apply through an agency. So we assume there's some sort of corruption kickback there.
Sure.
Because technically we had we saw on the government website we can apply that way.
Sure.
For a visa on arrival. Applied for electronically. Didn't happen, like I said, they directed us to this agency, so small fee, it wasn't a big deal, but like 20, 25 bucks or 25 euros. And sure enough, we arrived in Iran and they gave us our visa on arrival. It was easier and less paperwork than the Iranian visa. And that was it. So that was it. We drove a car. We went everywhere we wanted. That was it. Nobody detained us. Nobody asked us. Nobody stopped us. Nobody bothered us. No nothing.
So you couldn't have entered on a Canadian.
Not without a guided tour.
Not without the guided.
Not
tour.
without a guide.
Okay.
No.
Huh.
And you'd have to show that you have the guide and
Obviously,
all
yeah,
that
the booking and everything.
Yeah.
So
I-
probably have to have the guide waiting there for you.
And then going back to the other issue is the Canadian passport, by comparison to an EU, sucks ass. In Thailand here, we have a consulate. They're marginally helpful. I want any Canadian out there to understand, especially in government, that your Bangkok embassy is rude and unhelpful and sexist. Because I've known Canadians who are not Canadian born, they were Indian descent, came here, said the embassy helped them find work. When I first arrived in Thailand, I went there, asked for work, asked for some help. They refused, said, I won't help you. Literally, it was a woman who wasn't even Canadian. I think she was Vietnamese. And she must have been Canadian citizen later on. Came out, was quite rude, refused to help me, said, I won't help you. Period. I just won't help you. Well, but a woman coming from Canada can get help finding work. I asked for directions because it's quite a big place. They wouldn't help me. I saw a Thai and Canadian man looking for a visa. The staff was very rude, to the point I was with a girlfriend there, and I was like, we're not even going to apply for a visa for you. Forget it. They were extremely rude to this couple. I also went to the counter saying, okay, I want to register as a Canadian citizen here, because when I got here, I did arrive on a Canadian passport. I want to register so that the government knows I'm here. And the staff was, use the machine. I said, well, I don't know how to use that machine. I'm here at the counter. Can't you put me in the system? No, use the machine. Rude and unhelpful. The only person who was helpful was a man from I think it was some business office across the hall, and he told me where to go in the building for what services I need. And he was polite and friendly. Everybody else, rude, unhelpful. I came back to Thailand on a Spanish passport, and I have never looked back since. fuck you, Canada. Fuck you.
I've also had issues in going to Canada. The first issue I had was quite a long time ago, taking a day trip to Winnipeg, and we got to the border, and the guy asked for IDs, gave the IDs, and he says, "Okay, you pull over to the side." Just pulled over to the side, and we're just waiting, and waiting, and other people are coming, and you can see the American plates, and they're coming, and they're going through, and they're coming, and they're going through. And I'm sort of like, what's going on? What are we waiting for? I'm not a criminal. I hadn't committed any crime anywhere. Just sort of course, I had speeding tickets and stuff like that. The typical run of
You bastard.
I know. So finally, I get out of the car, go over to the booth where this guy is. It's just a small, crossover right there. And I said, "Hey, what's going on? Like, can you let us go to Winnipeg for the day? If not, we'll just turn around and go back home. Go back to the hotel where we're staying." And he's like, "Oh." And he gives us back our things. Says, "All right, you can go ahead." And I was like, "Well, what the hell did you keep us for?"
Asshole custom people you'll get in every country. Well, I've had that in the States. Not the exact situation, but rude. And they're customs people. They're inbred.
So the second issue, second and third, was so I had a business and I had a manufacturer's representative, right? And she repped a number of people. So one of them happened to live in Montreal. So
my hometown.
I flew up to meet him, and we were going to drive from Montreal to Fryeburg, Maine, which is not that far. So we get to the crossing to go into the U.S., and we pass through Canada with no issues. And we get to the American side, and, they interrogate me. And I'm like, "Why are you, like, I have the passport. He's got a Canadian passport. They didn't ask him dick." And they're interrogating me. When did you leave the U.S.? It was 3 or 4 days ago.
You know why?
So
it's those damn speeding tickets.
yeah, it's got to be. So now the show is finished in Fryeburg, Maine. We're driving back from Fryeburg, Maine to Montreal because that's where my ticket leaves from for the airline to go back home to California. And we come back. We leave from the American side, no questions. We get to the Canadian side, and they're asking me the questions again. And I'm like, and they're like,
"No, you got flagged somehow."
"Where are you going?" I'm like, "Going back to Montreal to catch my
You look
flight."
like an international criminal if I ever saw one.
Yeah,
You got
I
flagged.
guess. Yeah. I was the duo bomber.
There's other
Not the Unabomber. I was the duo bomber.
not the unit bomber either. No unit
Yeah,
bomber.
I'm not UN. I'm not even a bomber. So I don't know what the deal was, but just for some reason, for me, getting into Canada always seemed to be an issue.
You know what? I'm a Canadian citizen and I have the same, but I'll get into that later. There's other reasons I prefer the EU passport.
Yeah.
One is a Canadian passport, especially a 10-year version, but even the 5-year costs hundreds of dollars. It's very expensive.
Wow.
The Spanish one lasts me 10 years. It's a thinner book, mind you, and it costs me about $20, maybe less.
So it really goes by the volume of pages. How big?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just what the government wants to charge.
Because give you a big blank book
because the 5-year Canadian passport is thin like the Spanish one.
Yeah.
And it's still well over 150 Canadian dollars, maybe
Wow.
200 now. I don't know. But the Spanish one when I first applied was $14.
Yeah.
And Canadian. And
Maybe
now
they don't want you to leave.
it may be 20 something. The other thing is the besides the fact that you've got more freedom in some countries, obviously the EU, but entering certain countries with visas like Turkey, Laos, Vietnam, there is either no visa required or it's cheaper.
With the EU.
With the EU, much
Yeah.
cheaper. Like for Laos, I think for Vietnam, the Canadian passport is the most expensive one to get in.
Yeah.
And that's for whatever bilateral agreement they have or don't have. So even American visas are cheaper. And it goes by country. An EU passport, depending on what airport I get into, it's actually free. I don't even need a visa to get into Vietnam.
Yeah.
I can get one on arrival. And you got an EU passport, they'll give it to you on arrival. Or you can book it online.
So how do I become a EU
And
citizen
going into
and get an
Laos,
EU passport?
going into Laos, for example, I get one on arrival, like you all do. You go over a land border,
Right.
and it's much cheaper for the EU passport than it is the Canadian one, which you pay in US dollars,
Right.
and so or Thai baht, and so it's just so much more practical. The only disadvantage is Canada does have a consulate here in Chiang Mai, which is an honorary consulate. It's quite small, and like I said, there was one instance they were helpful, and one instance they weren't. Spain has some honorary consul here, but I think he's running it out of his house and he doesn't provide the normal services. I think it's more of a joke. So, yeah, I mean, so I have to go to Bangkok for stuff. It's well worth it.
Yeah.
Better service. The Spanish embassy was always super helpful and polite to me.
Right.
So, again, in case, did I say fuck you, Canada?
Now twice.
No, I mean, when I say that, I don't mean the country. I'm born and raised Canadian. It's great, but
Yeah.
the government, and at least how it treats me as a male living in Asia, garbage.
Yeah.
Garbage.
Well, let's go back to Tehran, and and we discussed the political aspect of it. What about the living aspect? How were the hotels, the food, all that stuff? How was the food?
The Iranian food, I know there's people who are going to disagree. I've tried Persian food even in Montreal, and Montreal has fantastic restaurants. It's like the New York of Canada, and I sometimes find the food there better than when you go to the country it comes from. I've tried Persian food in Montreal. It was bland compared to the Arabic food. And the food in Iran, just bland. It's the same everywhere. It's meat. I eat meat, but I like vegetables. So it's just kebabs everywhere, and that in itself is not an issue, but it's tasteless. They don't put enough spice or something, and it's just bland.
Okay.
It's just bland.
Yeah.
You know,
and you don't think it's because of
No,
you know, have eaten Thai food for?
No, because even before I moved to Thailand, I tried it decades ago in Montreal, and I found it was
Right.
bland.
Right.
Then you had something similar, the same type of dish with rice and a kebab, and in a Lebanese restaurant, it's like, oh, this is fantastic.
Right.
It's
Right.
fantastic. It's one of my favorite
Right.
foods, and it's not that different, except in somehow in the way they prepare it.
Right.
It must be the spices, because again, it's the same basic type of dish. But I also find Turkish food quite dry and bland. Iranian more so. Iranian even more than Turkish.
Yeah.
And everywhere you go, it's the same thing. It's kebabs, chicken kebabs. The variation you'll get might be their version of a burger or some pizza, which is okay, and that's it. And there's some areas in Tehran you go, you can't find a restaurant. You just can't find food. And there's other areas you go, it's just full of food, but it's kebab, chicken, burger, chicken kebab. We found one restaurant where some very nice people that sort of informed us about this whole hijab thing as well, and they had some vegetable dishes there, which were quite unique, like some soups and things, but they were unique and they were different, but I didn't find them very tasty. But that's maybe just because I didn't like them. Somebody else might. They were different.
Yeah.
The two places, the places that seem to have good food are hotels. Not the hotel we first stayed in Tehran. That kind of sucked. But there was a hotel in, I think the town was called Kashan, and they had a morning buffet with a lot of Western food, you know, oatmeal and porridge and toast, and they had some Iranian food, some Iranian breakfast there as well. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
And there was a hotel in, I believe it was Yazd, that had an afternoon buffet, and they had these stews. Now, we didn't stay in the hotel, but you could have the afternoon buffet. I think it was Yazd. It might have been Shiraz. I'm not sure. And they had these stews. One was camel, one was chicken. And I was a bit averse to chicken, so was my friend, because we got food poisoning in Tehran, which was surprising because everything was quite clean. But we got horrible food poisoning, and we're pretty sure it was the chicken, not the beef that we ate.
Sure.
And the stew was fantastic. I liked it. I just couldn't eat that much because chicken, I was a bit averse to it. And they had camel stew.
Yeah.
Oh, it was heaven. It was just fantastic.
Yeah.
That was
Camel
really
is
good.
pretty good.
Oh, and that's another thing. They do have de-alcoholized beer there. I mean, you can buy non-alcoholic beer
Yeah.
everywhere in
It's
Iran.
same in Saudi Arabia.
But you know, I mean,
Near beer, zero beer.
yeah, I mean, it tasted quite good, but it's no alcohol.
Right. It just lacks that bite that
It lacks the bite. Yeah.
that alcohol gives.
You know, when I was there, I didn't find the lack of pork and the lack of. I'm not a big meat eater anyway. The lack of pork and the lack of beer to be a problem.
Yeah.
It's when I got back I realized, oh, you know, it really would be nice to have a beer and, you know, some kanamu grab, you know, something with a little bit of pork in it, and I just loved it when I had it here. It's just, I was like, oh yeah, I missed that. You know?
Yeah, it's an issue as far as Saudi Arabia, being in Saudi Arabia. It's an issue.
Yeah, tell me about that. Let's make some comparisons.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously there's no pork legally obtainable nor alcohol legally obtainable.
Same in Iran. They told me they get it privately, and
but it can be gotten, but it is illegal. And
is the alcohol dangerous? Because I read, now the Iranians didn't tell me this, but I read that you can get alcohol, but it comes from, you know, it's bootleg, and even the suppliers don't sometimes know the source, and it can be actually dangerous to drink.
Yeah, it's essentially moonshine, and you don't know who's making it or how they're making it or what they're using to make it. Exactly. You know, of course, the equipment to make it can be had, but constructing it would be illegal as well. There are people who get busted. The other source is because there's alcohol available just outside of Saudi Arabia, it can be snuck in, bootlegged in. So you can get real alcohol, real, you know, whatever, gin, vodka, tequila.
Is taking the risk worth it?
No, because I'll give you an example. While I was there, a 70-year-old British man who was working there got caught with 2 bottles of wine. He was sentenced to 100 lashes, and I believe he was supposed to spend a year, possibly more, in jail.
In a Saudi prison, that ain't going to be fun.
He'd gotten 50 of the lashes. The British Embassy was trying to get him out. I believe he also had cancer, and he wasn't getting the proper treatment. They were trying to get him out, and the government was, as far as I understand, resisting. They had stopped at the 50 lashes, and I think they waived the other 50, but they were demanding that he stay in the jail. Okay, so it sounds a little harsh, but here's the thing. Before you enter Saudi Arabia, there is a document that you sign that lists punishable offenses. Okay?
That's the law.
And that is the law. And you know it, and you're a guest. You're not a citizen there.
And even if you're a citizen, you're subject to
those laws. Even if you're a citizen, you're subject to those, but you're a guest. And, you know, you should have half a mind to not go in and break those, whether you think it's ridiculous or not.
It's the same as we said about the protesting. I mean,
sure.
From our standards, it's unconscionable. They're ridiculous laws. That's a lot of things I would say. A lot of the stuff in Iran was silly and ridiculous, like the whole hijab in the car thing. But the fact is as much as I don't agree with them, the fact is that's the law. You know the risk when you're doing it.
Sure.
And yes, it's unfair, it's horrific, but don't take the risk. Don't go protest or don't hang around protests in a country with a dictatorship.
Yeah.
So you're partly at fault for that.
Saudi Arabia has become much that leaps and bounds towards being more liberal. They're not 100% liberal, but
not 100% doesn't quite sound like it's even close.
It's not close, but there have been advances. Women now have jobs. Women drive. Women have shops, just like Iran. Women. What was the other? Just had it on the tip of my tongue. They're gaining a lot. The hijabs and even Okay, so the hijabs they don't have to wear, and a lot of women have taken off the niqab, which is the face covering. So those that were are no longer covering their face, but they may be wearing the hijab. So it has gotten a lot better. There's still modesty, and there's still modesty ingrained. So I have seen Saudi women with the abaya unbuttoned, more like a robe than a gown, wearing jeans and shoes. It's pushing the edge of the.
When you say shoes, I mean I assume they're wearing
high-heeled shoes.
Okay.
High-heeled shoes. I've seen them wearing sweatpants and tennis shoes.
That was something I found weird in Iran because at first I thought, okay, there's a modesty thing with the shoes because I'd see them. Sometimes you could even see their cleavage. They'd be wearing something low cut, so they weren't shy to show cleavage.
Yeah, I did not see
Most
that.
didn't. But
I've not
most
seen that.
didn't, but you'd see things that were fairly tight around the breast and so
Yeah.
on. That not the norm. Like I said, some people wearing abas. You call it
Abayas.
abayas. Okay, I don't know what they call it in Iran.
Yeah. ABAYA with an S as
I knew
plural.
what a niqab was and a burqa and a hijab, but not
Yeah.
an abaya. So anyway, quite a few of them wore it, but that's voluntary. Even the ones who did, sometimes you would see jeans. But what I found 90% of the time, 99% was their. Look, I'm not a shoe salesman, and I'm not a fashion designer, but the shoes women wear in Iran are atrociously hideous.
Yeah.
They're ugly as hell. They're either wearing sneakers, or they wear these shoes that look like running shoes with a very thick heel like this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it looks like Frankenstein shoes, just this
Yep.
block that they put on their feet.
Yep.
They're hideously ugly.
Yes.
And the women in Iran are beautiful.
Yeah.
They're absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
And so you get these beautiful women with or without a hijab, most with,
Yeah.
Western clothes, jeans maybe, or
Yeah.
not, or maybe more conservative. And these atrocious shoes.
Like they should be in Kiss.
Oh,
With the giant,
yeah.
the giant platforms.
The giant platform shoes.
Yeah.
They're just hideous.
Should be in a.
Some of them were
rock
just
band.
wearing sneakers or joggers, and it was like, okay, that's a little bit better. And that was the norm, 99.9999%.
Yes.
One time I found a woman, and this goes to show how liberal it is. She was wearing a hijab, but she was all in black leather. I'm not kidding you. In Tehran, black leather, tight black leather, and I was like, is this okay? Apparently it is. She was wearing her hijab,
Yeah.
and she had black high heel shoes.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the first woman I've seen with like attractive shoes. And I don't mean that only high heels are attractive. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying women need to fuck up their backs and wear high heels. But there are shoes that are not high heels that are attractive.
Yeah.
Their choice is hideous. And I say choice, and I'm getting to it. And so I thought, that's weird, high heel shoes. And that same day I found a couple of shops with similar shoes, black, high-heeled, and other styles of shoes that were not high-heeled, but were like you find here, like typical women's shoes that are not hideously repulsive and repugnant to the point I'm going to vomit.
Right.
And they were decent shoes. And I asked the shop owner. I said, let me ask you something. Is this okay? Because I see women wearing very ugly shoes, and I've seen one or two with high heel shoes. And your shop has high heel shoes. I even took pictures. I said, is this okay? He says, oh, it's totally legal. He says they can wear what they want here.
Yeah.
It's totally fine.
Yeah.
I said, really? Because I don't see many shops with your style of shoes. He says, that may be, but it's totally legal to sell this. It's totally legal for them to wear it. They can wear high heels if they want. They can wear other women more feminine shoes if they want.
Yeah.
And I should have videotaped it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, there's a very interesting dichotomy. Women aren't supposed to wear makeup, but there are tons of makeup shops in the malls.
I didn't see a single Iranian woman not wearing makeup.
Yeah.
And long nails with nail polish.
Yeah.
And plastic surgery. Plastic surgery is huge. I saw about every 3 out of 10 had a nose bandage or chin bandages, and the ones who didn't, you could see they'd already been worked on. Even a few rare men.
Right.
It seems to be like the Korea of the Middle East.
It's actually become one of those status symbols.
Oh, sure.
To have your nose fixed or your chin fixed or something like that. And I've actually seen that on one of the another YouTube channels where he's talking about different things that countries do with like the African lip plates and the Karen long neck rings, and then this was mentioned with Iranians fixing their nose and.
What, besides the fashion statement, I mean, I would have to say Iran is similar to Thailand in that when they get their plastic surgery done, they look like aliens. They don't look attractive at all. I mean, this is a message to women of the Middle East and Asian women. When you get your plastic surgery, it doesn't look attractive.
Yeah.
With the funny chin and the Western nose and the inflated lips, you don't look attractive. You look like a fucking alien. It's bizarre. It looks weird. It's unattractive. Why would you mess yourself up like that? Okay, if you're hideously
Why
ugly...
would any woman do that?
Well, I mean, if you're
they
really
do.
ugly, and that could be a man too, I could understand adjusting your nose or something. You know, I've got a huge nose. I've even thought of it. But when you put in these bizarre chins that don't look natural and a nose that clearly doesn't fit, if you're Asian, that doesn't look Asian, or if you're Middle Eastern, you're Caucasian, you put some nose on that looks like it belongs on a dog or a cat or something. Fashion statement or not, it just looks stupid. It looks bizarre. It looks alien. I mean, you really don't look human. Some of them really don't look human, and they do a lot of Botox. They got these huge lips. We got to put up.
I didn't really.
I'm going to put up a picture of those American. I think they're Ukrainian Americans. Those two twins who had the bizarre surgery. They look like cats.
I didn't see a
look
lot
human
of the
anymore.
surgery in Saudi Arabia. I did not see women, changing their faces, and the food in Saudi Arabia, because you mentioned that, the food in Iran was bland, is definitely not bland, and there's every variety of foreign food that you could possibly want there.
That you couldn't find in Iran.
Yeah, so you've got Indian food, lots of Indian food. You've got hamburgers. You've some stellar pizza. Just
pizza and burgers they have, but they're not stellar.
this is fantastic pizza. Fantastic burgers.
What about the
lamb that we talked about?
What about the Saudi food itself?
Well, Saudi food is like kebsa, makluba, which is one of my favorites, which is another variant of kebsa. It's stews, but you have to remember there's, before development of Saudi Arabia, like the late 30s when they discovered oil, it was, they were nomadic, and those that were settled in cities, there's just sand all around them. There's not much horticulture. Horticulture in the north now is booming. So you do get like vegetables and stuff. Everything else is imported. Even before, it was all traded to bring in. So when you're getting that stuff in, yes, there's Saudi food, but most of the popular food, when I would talk to my Saudi friends, is this isn't really Saudi. It's from this country or it's from that country.
That makes sense.
So they have these fantastic falafel, right? A falafel's a chickpea. Where are you going to grow a chickpea in the sand, right? So they were imported, and with it was the idea of the falafel, and then it was Saudiized.
So they're Saudiizing or modifying their cuisine based on recent imports,
right?
Which is just normal.
And you can go and get falafel from a shop that does it Egyptian style.
Man, that stuff is dry. Falafel.
These falafel are awesome. I never had a dry falafel.
I have to say, talking about Middle Eastern food in general, Lebanese food, which we get in Montreal. I haven't been to Lebanon, but the food I love it. I just love it.
And I'll tell you that we used to go. A buddy of mine there used to go to a Lebanese restaurant, and the food was fantastic. It was different than Saudi food, and it was fantastic. But I've also had, like, Saudi style would be to take a half of a lamb. I think I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but I think it's tace is what it's called, and it's a lamb. That's the Arabic for it, tace, and it's a lamb that's, I think, less than a year old, and they take that sucker and they split him, like if he's standing up facing you, they split him right down the middle, and they cook him, and you get half a lamb on a bed of rice with peppers and some other vegetables.
My mouth is watering.
My mouth is watering too,
Please stop.
because it's fantastic, and all the parts are there. There's the meaty parts. There's the ears. You know, I love the ears of animals. You know, there's all those parts are right there for you to dip in, and it's done like big family style on a plastic sheet, and it's just awesome. And you know, that's a real sort of Saudi style of eating. Fantastic. Yeah, I never had issues with the food there. There's an abundance of stuff. Okay, their interpretation of Thai food is not that good. I think that stems from there not being Thai people there while I was there. Thai people have started to come back, so I'm sure there'll be some good Thai restaurants popping up. There was one Thai restaurant that opened about a year and a half before I left, and it was, the chef was a Thai guy from the south. It was pretty good, but it was sort of adapted to Saudi taste. So it, you know, had a little bit more sugar.
He's got to sell his product. You know.
He does, and it had a little bit more sugar than you would get. Than you would expect.
Sugar already in Thai food here.
I know, but there was a little bit more. So Saudis are big on sweets. So they have sweet shops that are just like 85% sugar. So I'm not talking about like rock candy or that kind. I'm talking about like they have these little churro like things, deep fried bread that they soak in like corn syrup sugar. They can be dripping when you eat them, or kunafa.
I can just feel my arteries clogging.
Yeah.
Just listening to this.
Or kunafa, which is like a fried sort of like thread-like dough with cheese in the middle, you know, with honey or just on the top. Tastes fantastic.
It sounds good.
But even if you're not diabetic already, you will be after you eat this. So it's like a once a month or once every 2 months kind of sweet to get. But you know, Greek baklava, they do their own version of it. It's really good with the phyllo dough, and they have other phyllo dough where they wrap it and, you know, bow tie it in every different way. But it's soaked in honey, and it's got
I think
pistachio.
I'm going to have to go to Saudi Arabia just for the food.
Pistachio is big there. Yeah, my mouth is watering because it really is good.
I'll make sure not to have any pork or alcohol stashed up my butt.
Yeah,
Which you know I
that.
do all the time when I go into airports. You know,
Yeah.
they frisk me and then they find some pork in a bag.
Don't do
because I kind of like it when they pull it out.
Don't do that. And again,
Maybe we'll have
you know,
to cut that out.
one thing we didn't touch on was like drugs. Okay.
Oh.
Marijuana and such. Captagon, which is speed, right? Is big there, and people get busted for that, and people that get busted for that literally lose their head.
Bye bye.
Yes. One thing, executions are public. On Fridays.
That's pretty barbaric.
On Fridays
Apparently
afternoon,
they had public execution in
and
some
you can
parts
go
of
see
Iran,
it.
but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and you're welcome to go. I have friends that their dad took them to see it just to scare the shit out of them, and it did. It was effective. It probably would be effective. And you know, I mean, it's all
That's pretty barbaric.
It's a thing. It's a thing for another. It's a topic for another whole video. But you know, there's the guy that does it. He gets
execution.
paid by the person being executed. Yeah.
Well, he gets paid to do it mercifully.
He gets given a sort of a token. Yeah.
That was how it was done in the Middle Ages as well. They were given money to be merciful and do it quick.
Yeah.
So he's not paid for the execution, I assume.
He's paid by the government. He's actually.
But he gets a tip by the person executing.
I believe.
Imagine that you have to tip your executioner, or you don't get good service.
I was told. Yeah.
I assume it's for a merciful execution.
Yes. Swift and one chop. So yeah, and the executions still do happen. Me personally, but what I will say is, you do not get executed unless you have violated the law, and the law is, you are clearly told as a foreigner.
Or get falsely accused somehow, in some way.
It's very difficult because they follow Islamic law, and it requires at least 3 independent people to say that you have done that, witnesses, to be committed.
By the way, let's edit out that part where I said it's gone up. I think I was confusing something I read about Iran. It's actually up in Iran.
Okay.
So we
All
just
right,
cut
we'll
that out.
edit that out. So yeah, I mean, listen, for me, the politics of a country is their politics. I'm not judging whether it's right or wrong. I'm simply saying that, having been there, these are the things that you
I would judge
can
it
go
as wrong, but
Yeah.
the fact is that unless you want to pay those consequences, which I sure as hell don't, I would recommend following the law. Don't go bitching after when you get arrested, detained, and beaten because you broke the law.
Right.
I'm not saying the law is right. I judge it as a bad, evil law, but that is the law, and you break it, you're going to have consequences. Don't whine to the West and whine to the media about unfairness when you knowingly did something stupid.
100% agree. In the mid 80s, I was in Australia, in Perth. At the time, policemen did not carry weapons. They had a car that they parked near their beat, and in the car there was a locked up shotgun. That was the only weapon that they had access to, other than SAPs, which is basically a weighted, it's got lead in it, and it's a leather handle that you could hit people.
Billy Bat.
Yeah, like a mini one. Just like you were talking about the police in Tehran, Australian police are huge. The minimum height was 6 feet. And they all look like they used to play rugby or Australian rules football.
That's how they were in Tehran, yeah.
So I remember having been there, and they told this guy to stop, don't run. And what did he do? He ran. So they chased him down, and they beat him senseless. And I asked a person, isn't that police brutality? I mean, can they do that? So, did you hear them tell him to stop? And I said, yes, I did. Did he stop? No, he didn't. You don't stop, you get beaten. You stop, you don't have a problem. I was like, okay. Seems square to me. I mean, I get it.
The fact is that when you're dealing with a superior force that has authority and weapons, you have to show subservience.
Yeah,
you have to.
That's called Sun Tzu. It's a little book like this that everyone can read. The Art of War. It is in there.
I just call it logic, although I read the book. I mean, they're dominant.
It is logic.
They have the authority. They can do what they want to you and may or may not be accountable later, but the fact is you'll have to suffer the consequences. So they want to be dominant, you have to show them that they are dominant by following their instructions.
Yes.
And that happens a lot, in your country where people don't follow.
They don't follow the instructions.
And then, the police brutality. Yeah, they were brutal. They shouldn't be doing that, but maybe it wouldn't have happened if you just got out of the car like you were told.
Exactly. So, yeah, there are lots of things that I enjoyed about Saudi Arabia. You mentioned enjoying the pork and the beer when you came back, not realizing it. The first time that I went there, it was like, I don't really miss that. Then you come back, and it's like, wow, I miss these things. Then you have to go back, because you were just on vacation, and you have to go back to work, and you're like, ugh. And so what happens is now, it's not even a physical. You don't need beer, and you don't need pork to live and survive. But now that you've had them, it's this psychological oppression.
It's something that gives you pleasure.
Yes,
there may be some endorphins released, or some sort of
and you
Some
start
sort of hormone.
feeling this need, and then every other little thing that you just used to let slide off your back, like water off a duck, starts to irritate you, and you get to the point where like you start looking forward to the next vacation, or you're like, I've got to take a week and go somewhere, right? So yeah, it becomes mildly oppressive. So
Before we wrap up, because you have to get going.
yep.
I wanted to follow up with a more positive statement about Iran, because I've said the food was this and people look stern, but I did say at the beginning they weren't as hospitable as I was expecting, because
Sure.
it was. But I think that's because it was so played up. I mean, everybody was like, "Oh, they're so hospitable," and the hospitality of Iranians, and it's the most hospitable place. They were hospitable.
Yeah.
They were friendly, and many of them said, "Welcome to my country." It's just that after so much buildup of the concept of hospitality, I found it not quite what I was expecting.
Yeah.
It wasn't as hospitable as that.
Yeah.
But they were, certainly some of them looked, like I said, unfriendly and intimidating, but they were all very helpful people.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say is in every country that I've been in, here in Saudi Arabia, and if we're talking negatively about them or we're picking on things, this is like the small portion of the things that suck to us here, at least to me.
Except when I talk about the Canadian government and our passports and the embassy. You guys suck ass.
Because 90% of Saudi Arabia was wonderful. I love Saudi Arabia. It's just the 10% of things that build on you that are annoying. And of course, it's wonderful what's wonderful about it. Why I can, fill a book of what's wonderful. But those are the things that are wonderful in every country, and nobody wants to hear about them. They want to hear about the 10% that sucks. So, yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Actually, I'll rephrase that. The Canadian government I have no issue with.
Yeah.
The embassy and the passports suck ass. But the government, actually, I've never had an issue with our government.
Yeah. So I
sucks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I thoroughly. I spent 8 years there. I enjoyed the people.
Saudi Arabia.
I had no issues with the government. I've got no issues with Thailand, but they have the same 10% of things that suck.
You're never going to get
Yeah.
perfect, and perfect for you is different from what's perfect for someone else. So it's
And I love my own country, but there are things in my own country that suck.
really
Yes.
America's imperfect.
Yes.
Shocking.
Yes. It's probably a treasonable offense to say that, but
I'm
taking the
with
risk.
you out ahead.
We talked about risk, so. All right, well, we do have to get going, and, watch our videos that we've already posted, and like, share, subscribe.
And hit the bell icon so you get all of our wonderful videos.
Oh, is that all you have to do is hit the bell?
If you hit the bell, then you get all
Ding.
the videos.
Well, I got a bell at home. I'll just ring
There's
it.
three settings. There's the slash through the bell, which means you won't get any notifications. Then there's personalized, which means you only get some based on whatever algorithm YouTube decides.
Yeah.
And if you hit the bell icon and it goes black, you get all the videos.
It's just becoming too complicated for me. I just need something simple.
Three settings.
Yeah, that's
That
too
way.
complicated. It's those three, and then there's 10 more, and yeah.
Those are just those three for now.
All right, so we're out of here. Hasta la vista.
Bye bye.
Das vidania. See ya. Bye. Okay.
Like, share, subscribe. It really helps with Al Gore's rhythm.